This is a Headgum podcast.
Hello, hello. This is Fake the Nation, where we talk about news, we talk about politics, and where we prepare for sizzling hot heat across the nation, because this isn't hot girl summer. This is hot earth summer. I am your host, Negin Farsad, the most heat-tolerant podcaster of all time. It's absolutely true. I'm like one of those crops they genetically modify to be drought-resistant. Like, I am totally drought and heat-resistant. Like, this 88-degree day in New York City feels totally fine and normal to me. I am bragging. All right, wow. Today, I know, it's a lot. I walked in, Andrew looked like he was gonna collapse, and I was just like, isn't this amazing? So anyways, everyone in New York City hates me. Today, we're gonna talk about the trending self-care routine of tween boys. We'll also talk about dictatorial restaurants, and we'll ask if liberals suck at running big cities. And we'll answer this election season's burning question: what the heck is Project 2025? Folks, today's lineup of panelists is among the greatest. We have with us just an old comedy buddy of mine, old as in we've known each other for a long time. He himself is just a quite young man. He is a comedy writer, a producer. He is, he's been responsible for so many of the jokes that you've loved, like on shows like Conan and whatnot. He is also the head writer of the new series, God's Gang. It's a new animated series that we'll talk about in a little bit. He is the wonderful Rob Kutner. Hey, Rob.
I'll tell your audience.
We are also joined by, again, one of my oldest comedy buddies, who is quite a young, strapping man. He is host of the Sirius XM show, Tell Me Everything, which is wonderful, which I've had the great pleasure of being on. He is also currently on tour with it's called the Sexy Liberal Tour. It's a tour he's done before with a bunch of really amazing other comedians and storytellers. And you can get tickets for that at the sexyliberaltour.com.
Sexyliberal.com or Live Nation.
Or Live Nation.
Yeah, it's a good year to work with them.
He's dipping his toes into this little upstart Live Nation. And if you haven't seen this guy perform live, like, this is your chance. You should absolutely do it. It's one of the best times you can have on an evening out. It is the wonderful John Fugelsang.
Thank you, Ms. Farsad.
Folks, before we get into the show, just a quick reminder that if you would like to support the show, first of all, we love that you listen. But there's other ways you could support. One of them is to subscribe to us on YouTube. It's YouTube/Negin Farsad, so youtube.com/Negin Farsad. But you can also join the Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad, and that's where you can get bonus episodes of the show. We have different tiers of support. It's a fun time. There's extra content. It's all the stuff you love about the show, but more of that stuff. So go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad. Thank you so much to everyone who's been supporting the show for this many years. We really, really appreciate it. And now, let us get into it with topic number one. Okay, so allow me to read the introduction to a recent piece in the Times about boys and cologne. Quote: on a recent trip to Sephora, 11-year-old Lincoln Rivera asked his mom for a $125 atomizer of Yves Saint Laurent Eau de Parfum. He also covets scents from Jean-Paul Gaultier, which he learned about from the animated movie Megamind, and Paco Rabanne. Some of its cologne bottles are shaped like robots, end quote. Now, what the writer goes on to suggest is that there is an epidemic of tween boy cologne obsession. So my question to you is, what is happening here? I mean, the story contains so many fifth graders. Fugelsang, explain.
Well, as near as I can figure from reading this story, what I've learned is that 26% of the world's population doesn't have access to safe drinking water, and 46% of the world's population lacks access to basic sanitation. Meanwhile, in Westchester, 10-year-old boys are demanding bottles of eau de parfum. So that's what I learned about the first world from this article. And Westchester is the world, isn't it? Wow. I mean, this article, you can almost see the class struggle from the headline. And I live with a 12-year-old boy,
Yes.
and he came to me and wanted a fancy eau de parfum. And because that's the thing that all 10-year-old boys are doing, all not just Westchester, up in here in Harlem apparently. So I actually got him a very valuable, expensive men's cologne. The Old Spice, I told him it's called Old Spice, and he's very happy with that right now. You know, I keep reading articles on how young people aren't having sex anymore,
Yeah.
and now we know why, because they're wearing cologne. Cologne was created for one reason: to hide how French men naturally smell. It is an outdated technology. It's like beta tapes. We don't need it anymore. This is overall a harmless story, but I just want to say I grew up on Long Island in the 80s, and this was like a Drakkar Noir trigger warning for me, this entire article.
Rob, you also have children in your midst. What say you?
Well, now I have to bring them into it, so I'm going to get canceled in my own house. But I have a nearly 12-year-old boy, and first of all, I'm getting a little proud right now that he's so not into this trend at all, and not interested. So I've done something right. He's more what you call a Renaissance man. By the way, people used to smell during the Renaissance. But the other point I have is my daughter's in high school, and she is obviously surrounded by high school boys. And they were on a class trip recently where they were traveling through an airport. And I don't know if you know this, but Tom Ford has a cologne for men called. Can I use the F-bomb on this family
yes,
podcast?
please. Yeah.
It's called effing fabulous. But
okay.
And so the boys found a duty-free shop at the airport and were running around yelling at each other, guys, they've got fucking fabulous. They've got fucking fabulous. And it was such a contrast from when I used to go on high school trips, and those same boys would have been putting my head in a toilet.
Yeah, that's what airport toilets are for. Yeah, it's funny because I learned a new term reading this piece. It was called smell maxing, where you can it's a TikTok word where you improve your Musk recommend scents for working out, date night, and middle school.
Wow.
So smell maxing is something that you can do.
It smells like mystery meat. Is that the smell of middle school?
Oh my God, gross. I mean, it's funny because I think like we talked about the trend with girl skincare, with tween skincare a few months ago on this show. So we've been doing the work that needs to be done on this show by tracking these tween trends. And I just want to please, no thanks necessary. We're just doing what we know is right. And I think part of this is just like a backlash to like how much skincare attention the girls are getting like in national media. And the boys are just like, well, now we also have our thing, so I feel like part of it is that, I don't know. It's so interesting to me that I mean, but kids have always been into expensive things. I remember when I was little, like there were particular sneakers or whatever that kids wanted to wear when we were in middle school. Like, I mean, it's, I guess I should, I don't think there's any surprise that an expensive thing is popular.
Yeah, but when I was 12, I spent $125 to buy an Atari 2600. Not to smell like a Portuguese cat house. All right, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find so fascinating is that it doesn't seem fun. That's what that's why.
Negin, don't take pointless soul deadening conformity away from young people, Negin. It drives our economy.
I remember there was like a time, I don't remember, I must have been in elementary school where like there was like a particular type of like pogo stick contraction. I think it was like on a ball. I don't remember, but it was like everybody wanted that and everybody talked about getting it. And like and that was fun. I mean, for real, you know what I mean? Like, so I could see a rage about that, or like those hoverboards. I can remember that era, whenever that was.
Mm-hmm.
I can, where everybody caught fire.
Books for a long time. Books were a thing for young people. I remember that. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to another weird trend, or just like a weird moment in culture. There's a restaurant called Bliss Caribbean Restaurant in St. Louis County, Missouri, and they won't seat women under 30 and men under 35. Okay, the owner said, quote, "We decided to come up with a whole restaurant where adults could pretty much go on vacation for a fraction of the cost," and quote, that they were going for a grown and sexy vibe. So what do you think of this particular rule at a restaurant, Rob? Does that make you more or less inclined to go to that restaurant?
Well, I mean, it sounds like a great assortment of folks, right? With the 5-year age difference built in already.
I know.
They should call it like, the second marriage cafe or something.
Well, but it's also just like the thing that they say about like boys and girls, like girls are more mature, but it's like carried into well into adulthood. Like you know what I mean? Like a 35-year-old man is only just reaching the age of 30 for women. Anyway, I thought that was so ridiculous. But do you think they're overstepping here?
I mean, I've been on both sides of it. As you know, you have a little one or little ones as well, so I know how terrible we are. I used to describe the Mona Lisa smile as the expression on a waitress seeing me bring my kids into a restaurant. But I mean, I think there's just a place for everyone. So if you want to be in that sort of joyless space that they've set up, then that's your prison sentence. If you want to be in that, I mean, there's so many other crappy restaurants to go to in Missouri. That,
Fugelsang, like when you go out on a night with your lady and you don't have the kid, are you like really desperate to not see children?
Well, what I like about this club is that they admit that men in their 20s are still children. I appreciate that bit of social honesty. I wish so much that someone had told me this in my 20s, because I wouldn't have felt so bad about how juvenile I was. I mean, so much guilt would have been stripped from me if I was told, no, you're supposed to be an adolescent douchebag at this period. Look, I mean, the best part about going out to bars and restaurants, we all know what it is. It's the drunk tech bros high-fiving each other and screaming while a bachelorette party goes woo. So I hate the thought of passing that up. This is really popular. This restaurant is a Caribbean restaurant in St. Louis. And since they've done this, there have been all kinds of protests, but they are packed. They are open till 1:30 every night. They have a dance floor. Business is booming. And this proves my point that old age homes discriminate against young renters. Why shouldn't young millennials be allowed to live in the pod next to grandma? One person on their Facebook page, I want to read you a quote.
Please.
Bliss gives you this, what I think the city needs. He says, "We're tired of you young people tearing everything up." Apparently, this is great. Now, the problem they have is the age requirement is different based on gender, which means that it's not legal, not because they're discriminating on the basis of age. They're allowed to do that. They're now discriminating on the basis of sex. Letting a 30-year-old woman in while banning a 30-year-old man is a form of gender discrimination, no matter how wonderful it is. I'd like to think that Donald Trump put it best when he said, "See how much better things are when you're not constrained by law." I think the obvious solution to this is that they just need to make it a private club, and then they can do whatever they want. Overall, I support it, but I do believe there is a danger, because the fact that they won't allow 30-year-old men in means that this establishment does feed the men's rights victimhood industrial complex, and they will be playing victim over this any minute.
Totally. Okay, that's interesting. I gotta be honest, when I'm in a place and someone else, I just sort of tune out the kids. Like, if they're not my kid, I just tune out. Like, I mean, I'll fucking be concerned if your kid is like, running into the street or whatever, and I'll go catch that kid and I'll save the day. You know what I mean? Stuff like regular superhero stuff I will do. But like in terms of like going to a brunch and there's kids at a table, I just tune it out. Like I think people who get annoyed by that, But
this isn't about kids. This is about people in their 20s.
This is more about people in their 20s. That's right. Well, it's
people in their 20s mixed with alcohol. That's what this is about.
Right. No, that's true. And there is a place, though, for the record, in apparently Tinton Falls, New Jersey, called Nettie's House of Spaghetti, where they have banned children under the age of 10. So if you were worried that there wasn't a place that didn't exclude children, there is.
I'm on tour now. I'm not letting anybody under 60 into the theaters. That's my marketing strategy.
All right, folks, let's take a quick break. Let me know what you think of this restaurant, and have you gone to it? I'm sure we have a listener who's in the area, so hit us up. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Project 2025. And we are back, and we are ready for topic number 2. Now, before we get into Project 2025, I just want to have a quick hit of what it is that Rob Kutner is doing with this new show, God's Gang, because it is sort of exactly up my alley in terms of programming and message. And so, Rob, I just wanted you to tell the listeners really quickly what it's all about.
Yeah, so I was approached a few years ago by this entrepreneur in Israel who used to work for Disney and had this sort of spiritual awakening. He wanted to sort of bring peace to the world. He has 3 daughters. He wanted to make a better world for them. And he said he had this idea originally. He said we should have like the Power Rangers, but they're from different faiths, like from the different major world faiths, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. And they're all like martial arts badasses, the superpowers, and they work together as a team. They're like the Avengers, but just from different faith groups and different culture traditions. And it's not a he didn't want to like preach any particular religion or like, veggie tales it up, but it's just sort of showing without saying, hey, we can all just work together and we can pick common threats to the earth and humanity and have a great time and be friends. South Park did the super best friends. People have done sort of spoofy versions of it, but this was kind of done with the sincerity for kids to just sort of demonstrate this. And so he hired me to be the head writer of this thing, and it's so kind of controversial because it involves religion that his team that he assembled realized that like Netflix is not just going to buy something like that. The studios are going to be aware, going to be wary of that. So they decided to create the pilot and some episodes and put it online and let the world respond and show that there's interest in it. So they put it online on YouTube and everywhere, and it's got a huge response. It's got like 1.5 million subscribers, and this is the craziest part. The YouTube comments are nice.
Oh, what?
You ever heard that sentence expressed in any language? Like, there's like every 10th one, there's one that's like, just no, dude. That kind of like internet thing.
Right.
Like, no information at all. But like everyone else is like, oh, this is good. We should, including atheists. People are like, I don't believe, but I like this. So I think it's this model that if it gets enough people, then they'll take it to a buyer and they'll say, look, people are into this. You should give it a shot.
Well, I really hope that viewers, especially, what is the age range you think for this show?
I'd say it's about, they're saying like 6 to 16. So it starts pretty young. It has a lot of like wacky action slapstick comedy. That's mostly what it is. And then, it's sort of what they call co-viewing in the animation space, where we're sort of hoping that like parents will kind of watch it with kids because it's kind of interesting to sort of see that stuff, like to see that stuff portrayed. So it's kind of like not an annoying kids merch-driven show.
Right.
It's just a show that has a little bit of cultural content. But so that's what we're sort of saying. It's kind of an all ages kids thing.
So for, as a Muslim with a little, biracial Muslim kid, I just want to thank you because this is so, like I said, it's just totally up my alley. Like this is the kind of shit I would love for her to see. And how incredible. I mean, there's so many things available now for kids that were not available when I was growing up. And just, it's for all the complaining we do about the world, we're doing a lot of things right when it comes to educational programming for kids. There's a lot out there, and this is just a really fine example of that. So, guys, check out God's Gang on YouTube and spread the word so that the streamers know what they need to do. All right, now let's get into it. You may have heard of the term Project 2025 thrown around this election season, so I figured it's time for us to get our hands dirty and really get into what it is. Now, for starters, it's a 900-page policy document that outlines the goals for a second Trump term. And as with most things in Trump's politics, he didn't actually write it himself. It was the Heritage Foundation who laid it all out, but it's Trump who would implement it. Some highlights include they would ban abortion, obviously. They would require a loyalty oath to join the administration. It would dismantle the Department of Education, among many other things that filled out 900 pages. Now, first of all, Fugelsang, have you heard of this? And what were your first thoughts about it? Because, again, it's not from Trump's mouth, though some former Trump appointees did have a hand in authoring it. But I want to understand kind of like how seriously we should be taking this?
Well, every time they have a new manifesto, and this is this version. If you liked PNAC, the Project for a New American Century, and their lovely war, invasion, and occupation in Iraq, wait till you see the upgrade. Because the Christian nationalists have actually upgraded the entire wish list. And this is more or less, if this had just a couple more spelling errors and was written in crayon, it would appear like a sociopath's manifesto. It is a dystopian wet dream that is all about rendering America even more of an oligarch state, giving the president even more control to do everything without any kind of oversight. Again, this is under a Trump presidency, not under a Biden presidency. We want immunity for Trump, not immunity for Biden. Because as you know, Negin, the one thing our founding fathers really missed was having a king. So they want the president to have even more power with less oversight and to bring everything under what they call the unitary executive theory. Be a king, more or less. And again, this is the Christian nationalism wish list of everything they want to do. And it proves more than ever that Christian nationalism has absolutely nothing to do with the character called Jesus in a book called the Bible.
Rob, your feelings about this? Like, how freaked out are you, or are you like, eh?
I have a lot of feelings because some of it is scary and then some of it's just weird and confusing. But
Yeah.
it is like a reboot of like all the things we did. It's ironically at the first, I think, wet dream that would tend to ban wet dreams, I believe.
They want to protect the Constitution and ban pornography. So they've really thought these things through, folks. The First Amendment's in good hands.
It really has a ban on porn, which is like, if you thought Americans freaked out over high taxes on tea,
yes,
just
please.
wait to see what fluids we spill in Boston Harbor about this one. I'm just saying.
Yes, let freedom ring. Let's see the party of Donald Trump ban porn, please. I want to see this.
And it's also funny because the banning porn part, I think, is so fascinating because it is a little bit like thou protest too much. Like, porn is one of those bipartisan things. Like, everyone uses it. You know what I mean? And so I don't
porn
understand.
Is bipartisan, but banning porn is not bipartisan. It's only right-wingers like J.D. Vance. And if J.D. Vance wants people to stop watching porn, he should appear in it. We need more doughy men with eyeliner in porn, people.
I mean, and also, it's sort of also like IVF. IVF is another one of those things that's extremely bipartisan. But as we saw with the Southern Baptist Convention last week, there are elements of the right wing that would seek to ban it. Although there's a lot of Republicans that are also trying to like carve that out because, again, IVF is so popular among even evangelicals who can't conceive. So that one is really fun to me. I think the loyalty oath one, I mean, that's the unitary oath thing. The way government runs right now is that, like, we have career civil servants. They come back administration after administration. It's how we have a kind of, a stability from one administration to the next is these career civil servants. Those would be kind of at will of the president, who could then fire everybody. So no one would be protected. I think that's just like one of those signals to the rest of the world that, like, they can't count on the United States to have like a functioning, seamless situation.
MO is that he's a chaos agent. That's how he drives.
Right.
That's how dictators classically drive. And that's even the problem with the unitary executive. It's like Trump is not even unitary. Like, which Trump is this? Who's making? Is it Adderall Trump? Is it Big Mac coma Trump? Is it Trump who's just watched 9 hours of Fox News? Like, he's not even himself consistent, like from day to day or hour to hour.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, all you need to know about this is that they include the word woke in it. Okay, that's how serious a document this is. This is just America is like a mob restaurant being burned down for the insurance money at this point. But I'm old enough to remember when Heritage Foundation pretended they were better than Trump. Remember those days, folks?
Well, there's a lot of words that they would get rid of. So, like, part of the whole woke section of the document, they want to eliminate a long list of terms like sexual orientation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender equality, of course, abortion and reproductive rights. So those are just among the terms that they would ban.
Brilliant, great.
Scare quotes, like it's a, like wink, wink.
Right.
I hope they can find a way to destroy all the books that use those terms. I can't think of what way they would use, but I hope they think of something.
Yes.
So my question is like, where do we go from here politically with Project 2025? Is it help to just make people aware of it? Does it, I mean, what do we do now with this information? Because the interesting thing is I went out on the streets with moveon.org, and it's a piece that'll probably come out a little bit later. So I talked to a lot of Trump voters, and I'm not giving anything away from the video that we made, but a lot of Trump voters were actually deeply unaware of Project 2025. There were some voters who were just absolutely flabbergasted that Project 2025 would think that pornography should be outlawed. So part of what's interesting, I guess and again, it's like you can't change the mind of a real Trump voter. They've dug their heels in. But for someone, who's just kind of in the middle, I think some of these points would be really alarming. I think the porn one, just on its own, would move a lot of votes,
Just think of, just say 50 Shades of Grey, and then you've got a bipartisan movement against it.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Fugelsang, do you have any thoughts on what do we do with this information as citizens?
Yes, I mean, we have to talk about it. That's why I'm so glad that the Democrats in Congress are beginning to talk about it. We discuss Project 2025 every night on SiriusXM, and it really is just like a child serial killer's Christmas letter to Satan about all the things he wants. I always
really
fall back on John Lennon. The only way to deal with fascists is with nonviolence and ridicule. And this invites a lot of ridicule. And they always go too far. They're always going to be the dog that caught the car, way beyond Dobbs. I mean, they're literally trying to ban porn. Just that's all you need to know about this. Put that up front and watch. No one cares about having their basic liberties being chipped away, but they'll care about their Pornhub being closed down. These are American values, people. So I sort of think that this exists very valuably in a way of reminding people how deeply important it is to show up and vote this year, because I don't really believe the polls. I don't think it's a race between Trump and Biden. I think it's a race between Trumpism and not Trumpism. I think people are voting whether Donald Trump goes to jail or the White House is what this election is all about. And I think this sort of evidence is just what you need to get uninspired people off the couch. I think, like Westboro Baptist Church made a lot of people grossed out by homophobia, Project 2025 may ironically help drive turnout to defeat Project 2025. It's that creepy.
Yeah, it's super creepy. And by the way, before, just so that I don't peddle any misinformation, apparently it doesn't call for an abortion ban, but it does call for mifepristone to be pulled from shelves. And like I said, banning the terms around reproductive rights and abortion, banning those terms. So, I mean, it's sort of like,
it calls for empowering the people who want a national abortion ban. That's what matters.
Right.
You can't have this without that.
Also, fun fact, it calls for drilling in the Arctic, which even Exxon is like, guys, that's a bit much. So just to give you an idea of how far they're going beyond oil company rationale. So yeah, there it is.
It's like all the horrible children from the Wonka factory tour made a list of what they want now. That's what Project 2025 is.
Rob, any final thoughts? Have you been telling all your friends and family?
I'm inspired to do more of it, I think. And I think connecting the dots also is that the Trumpism point that John made is that the unitary thing also just basically says a lot of decisions can just be completely in the hands of the president. And if you keep saying Trump, there's a lot of people, I think, on the right-wing side of things who don't really who would rather have Republicans in charge, but don't like Trump either. They're sort of holding their noses. If you keep saying this is going to put Trump's finger on every button, Trump can actually decide these things himself. Maybe that could sort of widen the divide, I think, between what they think this is and what actually he plans to do.
Absolutely. All right, folks. You have your marching orders. Go and read a little bit more about Project 2025. There's a lot of we read a BBC explainer on it. There's a bunch of little Media Matters has some nice explainers on it. So go check those out. Have a couple of fun facts ready. I think the porn one is the only one you really need for a cocktail party. And then, start spreading the word. The election is really picking up. So let's get serious. All right, let us move on to topic number 3. We read a piece in the Times by Nicholas Kristof called What Have Liberals Done to the West Coast? And he starts by saying, quote, I'm an Oregonian who bores people at cocktail parties by singing the praises of the West. But the truth is that too often we offer a version of progressivism that doesn't result in progress. He then adds, we're more likely to believe that housing is a human right than conservatives in Florida or Texas, but less likely to actually get people housed. We accept a yawning gulf between our values and our outcomes. So he talks about the many actual benefits of liberal states. They have a longer life expectancy. They have lower levels of child poverty. GDP is 29% higher in blue states. More kids graduate high school and college. So the problem isn't quite liberal governance in most states. That actually yields much better results in a lot of places. What Kristof is really driving at is, in particular, West Coast liberalism. And he shows a lot of examples dividing West Coast and sort of Northeast liberalism and the results that we see there. So let's first take on that notion of West Coast liberalism, that it's somehow to blame. Rob, you live in LA. What do you say about LA's governance?
Well, I think I'm a really loyal and classic LA citizen, and that I barely pay attention to it or acknowledge that it's there. That's just the vibe. It's like so different from New York's or DC's or Boston or something like that. We were so checked out. But in part, I would say, I mean, I think all these things are well taken. San Francisco has certainly gotten like an unholy mess, and or like even there was an article I think you may have seen about like they couldn't build a bathroom and a playground because there were too many regulations and too many interest groups fighting about it, and it took forever to approve just a bathroom and a playground. I mean, I think the homeless situation is complex and there's a lot of factors behind it. But I also think that LA is just, and maybe San Francisco to some extent, is so giant that it's almost ungovernable. I mean, I think that's been the case for a while, and I think it's just all sort of coming to roost right now. I mean, it's a giant sprawl. There's like 72 mini cities in it. Everyone there is really just waiting to hear about their audition, or if their band's going to get signed. They're all hangry. They haven't eaten carbs for 6 months. It's just kind of a dystopian place that maybe that sort of worked for a while in the way that like 1970s SNL worked because everyone was coked up, and now they're still running things that way and people are healthy in its dysfunctional environment. But so I think because there's been sort of both types of governments. There's been like Republicans and Democrats running LA, and it's never been run well, I think, in a long time. I think it's just the problems are just accumulated and taken on kind of a death spiral where it's hard to get out of them.
Fugelsang.
Well, let's talk about our friend Mr. Kristof. I'm glad you pointed out, Negin, that he begins the entire piece selling his liberal bona fides. We know he ran for governor in Oregon and it didn't work out, but he begins the piece saying how great these Democratic states are. And you mentioned it. The per capita in Democratic states is like 30% higher. Child poverty is lower. Education's better. And I hope the New York Times does a 37-part series on why liberals should listen more to the Republican states with worse education and worse child poverty, by the way. But this is the New York Times, and Nick Kristof's not going to be writing articles about what's wrong with these suffering Republican states. So, yeah, you said it. He says the problem's not with liberalism, it's West Coast liberalism. And he points out the most homeless are in California and Oregon, and the states with the lowest rate of homelessness are Vermont, New York, and Maine. So it's pretty brilliant. But I've lived in LA and I've lived in New York. And you know what I've learned? It's warm in one of those places and it's cold in the other of those places. So I want to congratulate Nick Kristof and the New York Times for finally blaming liberals for good weather.
Right.
Because that's what this is an article about. Any society that allows billionaires and poverty to exist at the same time is not a society that's serious about surviving, okay? If we're saying, billionaires are acceptable and poverty is acceptable, we're not really thinking long-term as a culture. Listen, the Sackler family could tell you this. The drug overdoses have gone up, and he points this out last year in every Democratic state on the West Coast. So you want to talk about beginning to have a solution? There's no money in cleaning up homelessness. No one's going to get rich off of it. So how are you going to get the oligarch class to care about it? single payer healthcare is a start. Covering rehab and recovery under healthcare is a start to get people off the street. We could tax Musk, Bezos, Gates, and Zuckerberg. And with what we tax them, we could house all the homeless, get everyone on healthcare and free college, and those guys would never feel a pinch. Jeff Bezos would never be at a checkout counter and tell the cashier, oh, wait, I got to bring this back. I can't afford this. They would never, 4 guys we could tax and fix homelessness. It's great to point fingers, but as a society, we're not serious about fixing it in the first place.
I definitely think there's truth to all of that. I will push back a little bit and say something about Eric Adams, who's I think governing a little bit, and I'm not saying I'm an Eric Adams fan, or an enemy. One thing I've noticed about the Adams administration, I think a big thing that voters will notice and will vote on, is he did a couple of things when he got into office, and one of them is to pick up people who seem like homeless people who also seem like they are suffering from mental illness, that can't seem to make good decisions for themselves, and they're sleeping on the street. He has picked up a lot of those people. We don't have an encampment problem in the dead of summer, the way that California does. We just don't. Obviously, our weather is different, but also one of the hallmarks, I think, of his mayoralty, whether you like it or not, is that he's picking up people with mental illness and taking them to hospitals or whatever. And that is something that people notice because they're seeing fewer people roaming around on the street with like mental illness, right? Like that's the reality. And so I think that he and I'm sure there's a lot of like very liberal people that hate that policy, because it might violate the civil liberties of those people. But that's exactly the kind of thing that actually like might, that's like a noticeable change from when Adams took office. And I wonder if something like that is just not happening in Portland. He talked about a woman who ended up freezing to death because she refused to go into a homeless shelter in Portland. And so that's the kind of thing where you're like, she couldn't make the decision, right, to go to a homeless shelter, and there was no mechanism to save her life. So she froze to death. Mm-hmm. In New York, there is now that mechanism. So I wonder, and again, I don't even know where I stand. I'm just telling you guys what's happening. Okay. I don't know, where do you stand when you hear about a difference like that makes a huge impact on what you see as the streetscape of these cities?
I think the irony here is that what you're pointing out, which is really interesting, is that that's sort of the problem. I think at a place like LA, I think is that the problem continues because sometimes the governments take on sort of a quote unquote right wing approach to it. Like they don't look at it as treating the underlying causes of homelessness. They look at it as a law enforcement street cleaning problem. Like, can we just sort of shovel them over into the next district? Each district just pushes more laws to move the homeless away, as opposed to like doing anything about them. And that's why it persists, is because no one is looking at the underlying causes. So like to say it's a quote unquote liberal policy around the buck is exactly saying the opposite of the way it's being approached, why it's not working.
Yeah. By the way, as soon as you talk about taxing billionaires to pay for treatment for the homeless, people stop calling it a right-wing policy, and they'll start calling it a liberal policy.
Right.
I mean, this is why vagrancy laws are there, so they can do this if they have to. It all comes down to a question of depriving citizens of their liberty versus public health concerns. And so it's going to be different case to case for every person they round up off the street to impose treatment and recovery on. And of course, I'm a big believer in getting help for the mentally ill. I mean, I've grown up in New York City. I've grown up around this. It's so twisted now that last year we saw a guy murder a mentally ill homeless man by strangling him on a subway train, and right-wing media called the murderer the Good Samaritan. I mean, the Good Samaritan walks up to the homeless guy and says, "Are you okay?" Now, look, Eric Adams is there because people don't show up to vote for mayor. And I think it's great that New York City is so progressive. We're going to have a mayor who serves on an outpatient basis. I think it's really inspiring and very progressive to have an outpatient mayor here. But I mean, I would just say, I don't consider this to be a liberal policy. This is New York, where you have to be a Democrat. We've seen, authoritarian cop thugs, and we've seen billionaire businessmen call themselves Democrats so they can run for mayor. Our mayor is under federal investigation, and the governor just blew up the MTA's budget and killed congestion pricing. So I don't know how liberal New York's policies actually are, and I don't know what those words mean in some cases. But I do think a lot of liberals would get behind a program like this to provide care and take them off the street if they are a danger to themselves and others. The question just comes down to who's paying for this. Is it going to be local taxpayers, or are we going to have a tax on the people and corporations who can easily afford a little tax to improve the quality of life for all citizens?
Well, another example of that is, in the question of who's paying for this, is what happened in Oregon with the kind of radical, drug program where they were like, drugs are now legal. And the idea was that you wouldn't get arrested, nothing would really happen to you. But what was supposed to happen when they passed that law was there was supposed to be a lot of like drug rehabilitation centers that were supposed to be built in order to kind of help with the drug problem that was happening in Portland. But what happened is nothing got built, no programs were put into place because there was no, like, as you're saying, Fugelsang, no money behind it. And so they have this law that suddenly makes everything legal. And so of course, like, people go nuts. They start using drugs in location. And look, by all accounts from friends, I don't know. I haven't spent that much time in Portland, but friends of mine really complained about this. Like, they just thought it was just they were seeing incredible amounts of drug use in the open in front of children, and it sucked. So they have rescinded that law because that was a failed attempt. But the reason it was a failed attempt was because there was no teeth behind it in terms of like actually building the programs that would have then supported the actual drug problem. The idea was to help the drug
the classic
problem.
American response to all sides of different issues is to have a sexy sounding policy that sounds radical, that's all sizzle, and there's no institutional, because that stuff is boring and hard.
Yes.
Where there's kicking people out of mental institutions. Even under Kennedy, they were going to do this, and then never actually built. After the horrible institutions, they never built better ones.
That's
even
right.
The abortion thing, we're going to ban abortion, but not provide any more resources for mothers and their health. Like,
exactly.
We're all about the sizzle, and like there's no stake at all.
They don't want to pay for any of it. But if I could just say, Christoph makes some really thoughtful points about the fact that maybe the West is too far left, the South is too far right. Maybe, when you let liberals have too much free reign, they go too far for their utopia, and it needs to be a struggle every step of the way, a push and pull to make real progress come about. But again, we are in the very relatively early days of this historical period we're calling the national opioid health crisis. I mean, this is like saying we didn't do more to address man-made climate change in the 70s. You couldn't get anyone to believe it back then. We're just now in the early days of humans realizing what the words national opioid health crisis means, what kind of a con the Sackler family has run on all of us. And we haven't begun to really understand how opioids are the genie you can't put back in the bottle. And they've always been there, and they've always been marketed to citizens as non-addictive. Back in the 1800s, laudanum for women with emotional problems. Heroin was marketed as a children's non-addictive cough syrup in 1905. And of course, up to oxycodone. Like, we keep saying these things aren't addictive, and then we wonder why there's all these homeless people out there, or people who are turning to heroin, which is cheaper and stronger, when they can't get the oxy prescription anymore. So, like, we're only beginning to understand this problem, and the homelessness is a symptom of a much greater problem.
Well said. I mean, I think and the note I want to end on is Rob's point that real change is boring and detail oriented.
Yep.
And you have to have some fucking patience, and you have to, like, I mean, it's so funny because I look at these, when we're voting on when they'll put proposals in the in the election cycle, and you have to like really read them, and you have to like really understand them, and the writing is legalese, and some of them are like a quick yes no, it's a sexy thing, should marijuana be legal, you know what I mean? But some of them are like very dull, long-winded things about funding one particular bridge or whatever. Those are the things, guys. Those are the real things where we're making change. The ones where you want to just fucking kill yourself as you're reading it. My feeling is let's get into those, and instead of finding them so boring, let's find them endearing and and really lean in. All right, that, my friends, is the end of the show, and what a delightful, meaty conversation I got to have with my two friends. What I would really love is for you to be able to follow all of their wonderful work, everything that they do. Rob Kutner, where do they do that?
They can follow me on X at Apocalypse How, on Instagram at Rob Kutner, and just a little plug, I would love if people went to godsgang.com and watched the show and just liked it. Smash that like button, bros! Because
yeah, dudes.
those are the votes that will literally get the show into the world.
I mean, absolutely do it, just for all the little kids like mine who get to experience this show. Very, very exciting. Fugelsang, where do they find you?
You can find me at Twitter. I still call it that. I'm into dead naming. Twitter and Instagram and all the Threads things, and SiriusXM. If you don't have that, the John Fugelsang podcast brings you the best parts of our radio show every day for free, all the cool celebrity interviews and what have you. And I'm on tour with Stephanie Miller's Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour, coming to a town near you. Go to sexyliberal.com for that. And I think that's it. I'm writing a book right now, and I never leave the house, and it's nice to virtually see you both.
So great to see you. Follow everything that Fugelsang does. Check the website so you can see him live. I'm sure he is coming to a city near you. So please go do that. In the meantime, I just wanted to let listeners know that I will also be touring. Those dates are all up and ready to go. You can go to bit.ly/Great American Punchline. That's the name of the tour. It's called Great American Punchline. And we'll be in Milwaukee, Muncie, Indiana, Hazard, Kentucky, Memphis, Tennessee, and Fayetteville, Arkansas, between July 5th and July 14th. So you should come and see me if you're near one of those cities. These cities were very particularly chosen for their particular political mix. So I hope to see a lot of you out there. Again, you can go to bit.ly/Great American Punchline to get your tickets. Get them soon, so before they sell out. And otherwise, I would like to thank everyone who makes the show a possibility. That's our wonderful producer, Andrew McGuire, everyone at Headgum who makes the show possible. Thanks to Gaby Alter for our theme music. You can reach out to us at faiththenationpodcast@gmail.com with any questions you might have, ideas, for any reason at all whatsoever. You can subscribe to the YouTube. Again, smash the like button. Because that's where you will see episodes of this show, the faces of the people who are talking. And otherwise, we'll be back in your earballs next week.
That was a Headgum podcast.